Hi everyone, and welcome back to season 3 of Commerce Meets Law, a podcast we talk about various commercial topics and how they interact with the legal profession. Today's episode is a super exciting conversation with Tom Pritchard, the head of legal at Raw Charging and formerly a commercial litigator with a master's in environmental law and climate change policy. Now, there's a bit of a backstory to how this conversation actually ended up happening. So, Raw Charging is an CPO, is a charge point operator in the EV industry, and it is currently where I am actually doing an internship at the moment as part of their key accounts team. Now, I'm going to be talking a lot more about my internship and my experience in an upcoming video on the CMR YouTube channel, so stay tuned for that. But for now, I just wanted to mention it so that you know where this episode is coming from, because we actually recorded this in the office at Raw. So it was really, really exciting and it was actually a lot of fun. As soon as I started my role at Raw, about 3 weeks ago now, I wanted to speak to someone within the legal team immediately because I thought there was so much that we could explore in this world of sort of, EVs and environmental law, and something that's really, really an industry that's really growing. And therefore, there's definitely going to be roles for more lawyers in this space. So I thought that it would be so useful for all of our listeners and our community for Tom to come on the podcast. So I was so excited when he agreed to come on. In this episode, we discuss where Tom's initial interest in law stemmed from, particularly focusing on his passion for environmental law, his path to getting a training contract at Olswang, which is now part of CMS, life as a trainee at the firm, including a secondment to Amazon HQ, which I really wanted to know more about. So for all of you who are either avid Amazon users or just are interested in the company, definitely listen in for that part. Next, we also spoke about why he decided to then transition from private practice to working in-house, and when he first came across Raw and what his journey at the company has looked like over the last few years, including his professional goals for the future. I thoroughly love recording this episode with Tom. It was such a cool experience to do it at the office, and Tom was a true, true delight to speak to. So just a quick request before we get into the conversation. I'd really appreciate if you could kindly give the podcast a follow and a rating on Spotify or an Apple podcast, wherever you listen to these episodes, as it really helps Commerce Meets Law reach more listeners. Without further ado, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you right at the end. Hi, Tom, and welcome to Commerce Meets Law. Really, really excited to chat to you today and learn a lot about your journey. Sat in the Raw office as well, which we're going to get to. But before that, we always start with an icebreaker on the podcast, which is, in your opinion, what is your superpower?
Hi Shreya, nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on. What is my superpower? I like to think that my strengths are probably in remaining quite calm. I think that's always lent well to lots of the legal work that we do, be that litigation or time pressured deals. Really important that you don't lose your head and that you kind of work methodically through the challenges and to arrive at the place you want to be. And I think now that I'm in-house, people actually want to see me panic a bit. They want to get that sense of urgency that work is being done, and that where there are tight deadlines, I'm really aware of them. I mean, in my defense, I'd say I'm always aware of them. I just try to keep it calm on the outside, and now I've learned to actually maybe give that away a bit and start to show that I'm a bit flustered, because it gets people understanding that I'm on the same page as them.
That's really interesting. I guess it's that difference, which we're going to talk to hopefully as well about, being in private practice versus being in-house. And before we get to that, I guess talking a bit about your early sort of journey, when did law first come into the picture for you? When did sort of it become a career path that you were thinking about?
Quite late, I think. Yeah, I studied business first, and business was really what I picked at university because I didn't know what else I was going to do. I think had a lot of competing ideas in my mind about what I would do and how I would apply myself. Studied in the US, my first degree, where law isn't an undergraduate option.
Yeah.
There, everybody does law postgrad. So it's quite normal for people to pick something different, i.e. business, and then go into law. So I think law was always in my mind, even though I was studying business. But I suppose it became more of an option for me just as I realised what I enjoy and perhaps spoke more to friends and family about how they viewed me. I think I've always been quite analytical.
Yeah.
I think I've always been annoyingly pedantic.
It works brilliantly.
I think those two things suggest that I could have been a lawyer. And I think I just enjoy kind of complex problem solving. So I think those kinds of things will kind of push me towards the law.
So our last guest, Justin, had also studied in the US and had studied political sciences and then came into the world of law. And he was saying that for him, it was always, he was in the debate teams and that was a big part of his childhood. And so it was a very natural progression. Was that much a big part of your life, or were you more, towards the other end of like more writing as opposed to speaking?
Yeah, I've always been much more comfortable behind the keyboard than the lectern.
Yeah.
But I did, do the mooting championships in university, just kind of pad out my CV a bit, have something to speak about. It went horrifically wrong. I remember I turned up to the national championships in Pimlico, my first year of studying law, and we got absolutely trounced. So I don't think on the spot debating is really for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely do enjoy kind of the cut and thrust of an argument, for better or worse, trying to get out of my personal life.
And you mentioned studying in the US and studying international business. How did you then decide to make the move to the UK in terms of wanting to study law here?
Yeah, so I guess my background does require a little bit of explanation. If you looked at my CV, you might assume that I was born in the US, but I wasn't. I was born here in the UK.
I can hear it from the accent too.
So it wasn't always the case. My dad's an engineer, and so because of that, we've moved around quite a lot as a family.
Right.
So we lived in Australia when I was quite young. Came back to the UK, and then my dad got another opportunity in the US. I finished high school in America, and I did my first degree, as I mentioned, in America.
Right.
Before I moved back to the UK.
Ah, interesting. And did you ever consider doing your law degree out there and then staying out in the US, or was the UK, was that always what you wanted to return to?
Yes, I did consider it. I've got a twin sister who stayed out in the US, and so we were that was a seminal moment for us where we decided I was going to go back to the UK, she was going to stay in the US. But for me, I always wanted to come back to the UK. I always felt English, whatever that means. I felt a strong draw towards coming and working in London.
Talking about your legal career, there's so many little pivots and different things you've done, so I want to get into some of them. And I guess from where your journey started, you mentioned that, you wanted to kind of sit behind a desk, perhaps, as opposed to a lectern, so maybe the solicitor path was already more there. But when did you first consider commercial law? Was that always what you were aiming for, and how did you first sort of get into that part?
No, I wouldn't say commercial was my first draw. I mean, if I take a step back and I'm quite frank about my motivation, I was pretty political during my time at university.
Yeah.
I mean, this was kind of late 2008, 2009. Climate change was obviously a very hot topic. There was still a lot of climate change skepticism at that time, and so I guess it didn't feel like it does today, where you can say, well, the science is undisputed, and maybe the issues now are actually keeping it as a priority rather than arguing whether it is a priority. So I mean, I was really influenced by authors at the time. Particular books that really spoke to me I read Thomas Friedman's Hot, Flat and Crowded. I read like Amory Lovin's Natural Capital, and I was really interested in the climate change agenda.
Right.
And so I think somewhat naively, well, definitely naively, I thought if I study law, I can apply myself to environmental causes using my legal training.
Yeah.
I had no idea how difficult and how misguided that notion would be. But if I look at my career and around, that has been always what has driven me, is the kind of the ideological view, I suppose, that your career can be many things, but I hope to look back at it at the end and say I applied myself to address that challenge in some small way.
Definitely. And I think that, like you say, at that point it was a big thing, and it's an even big thing now, especially as we see the real life effects of what climate change is having across the world and even in the UK, even if you don't look beyond the national landscape. And I guess in that sense, there might be a lot of people like you were at the time studying at university, whether that's law or an adjacent thing, wanting to either get into policy or from a private perspective, because there's so much that companies can do from a funding and trying to, I guess, create in terms of improving climate change. So for you, what did the options look like at the time in terms of how you could practice, and how did you decide where you wanted to apply?
Yeah, it's something I've struggled with throughout my career, I suppose. If I could have just had my nice straight path,
Yeah.
I would have qualified as a solicitor at kind of one of the more, should we say, public good style law firms, and really applied myself as an environmental litigator. That was the dream, was to kind of take on the big oil corporations and
Yeah.
advance kind of public good litigation where you're looking to enforce the Climate Change Act. I mean, I really had in mind later in my career, as they became a bigger thing, working for someone like Client Earth. It's really got a political angle to it, an activist angle to it, which I frankly just thought was super cool. I wanted to be part of. But if I rewind to 2009, when I started my law degree, 2011 when I finished my law degree, because I did kind of an accelerated 2-year LLB. We had just come out of a global recession, and it was really tough to get into the legal profession. So many more law students than there were jobs. So many associates and partners who had just lost their jobs from prior firms.
Right.
So flooding the market with really good and experienced people.
Yeah.
So I had to kind of scrape my way through the beginning of my career. I mean, I started out at a tiny civil litigation practice in Holborn, central London. There were two partners, kind of two associates, and a team of paralegals, and we were doing lots of personal injury work.
Right.
Yeah. And it wasn't what I wanted to do, but it got me that first. And in fact, I remember I worked, I think, the first 6 months for free.
Yeah.
And that's how desperate people were to get experience back then. So I went to a lot of debt, just to get that first experience. And slowly you build on that. From that, I've got a paid position, thankfully. And then once I'd been there a year or so, maybe more, an opportunity came up to paralegal at a slightly bigger firm,
Right.
which was Olswang, and they had an opening in their employment team. So again, I didn't know much, if anything, about employment law, but it was a step up in terms of law firm, and they were willing to teach me on the job. And that was, I look back, there's a lot of kind of really just giving yourself over to the role and doing whatever was required. I remember we used to prepare for employment tribunal hearings, and that was the kind of pretty unglamorous work of preparing bundles, of changing pages out in the council's bundle, of running the bundle to the court, doing really late night disclosure exercises, and just slowly kind of earning the respect of the associates and the partners by really just being there to do whatever was necessary to help them out. So yeah, pretty slow start to my career, in all honesty. It took me a long time to get the training contract.
Yeah, and the aim of this podcast is to show unique journeys like that, because I think that on LinkedIn or on places it can look very glamorous. It can look like you just come out of uni with a TC and off you go, and then you're set for the rest of your life. And that's not even now there are more lawyers and graduates, and there are positions at that junior end, especially at those top law firms. Is that where if that's where you want to be? So I think that understanding that your path, you can get where you want to be, it might just take longer than you initially expect it to. And I guess from your perspective, there's a lot of people at the moment who may be paralegaling, and maybe they've just got out of uni and they just think, I just need a foot in the door and then I can work my way up. How did you kind of can help to convert that sort of from that paralegal position to the trainee solicitor position? Were there some tips or tricks or advice that you either got or you maybe learned in that time that helped you get a kind of an NQ position at the firm?
Yeah, I wish I could offer some kind of magic bullet, but it really wasn't. It was time and it was commitment. It was building relationships.
Yeah.
I think I was a paralegal at Allswang for 18 months before they said, obviously I kept asking, I know you've got your conventional route by which you become a trainee, but if there's ever any ways in which I can be interviewing, if there's anything I can do to improve my candidacy. I had some pretty good relationships with a few of the partners in the employment team, and they were pretty frank with me. It's not easy, but you apply yourself, and I'll do what I can to put in a good word.
Right.
And that was it really. And then I had my foot in the door for an interview. And I think once you're in that interview, if you've got real world experience like that, you've got so much to talk about. Now that I'm in the fortunate position of being able to interview, I really like to hear about people who have that grit, have that determination. I went to law school with a lot of people who just said this is too hard, and went and did something else.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to stand up here and say, I dreamt of being a solicitor when I was 3 years old. That's not me. But once I applied myself to something, it is just about, being committed and giving it your focus. Because I think employers will always respond to people who are willing to give themselves to the role. You can see people who are much more articulate, much more textbook intelligent.
Yeah.
They went to the right university, but I think everybody can relate to actually putting in the work to improve your candidacy.
Absolutely. I think you'd be surprised how many people I've spoken to who've said that even now in interviews, people say, oh, I wanted to be a lawyer since I was 5, I wanted to be at this firm since I was 5. And you just think you didn't even know what that was at that point. I mean, that is just, no one is going to believe that, right? Versus someone who's... Exactly. The people who've in fact had very interesting jobs, they've worked alongside uni and they've learned how to be with customers throughout that and just deal with people in general are so much more likely to, because they can pick up the technical and the legal stuff, but if they can't build a relationship, they're not going to get very far. And I think that that's a distinction that more people need to know, especially those who feel like they are cut out because they don't have those connections. And it's like, well, actually the experience that you have is great. It's just about utilizing it in the right way. And that was really shown in your journey as well in terms of building relationships and getting to that position. And I guess having come from quite a litigation heavy background, during your TC then, what sorts of seats did you do? And were there any that surprised you, like you thought you wouldn't enjoy them, but you actually thought, oh, this is great?
In my training contract, I did a corporate seat, construction seat, commercial litigation, and then I did a comment at the end with Amazon. And I did not enjoy my corporate seat. That's not for me.
Yeah.
Now, ironically, now that I'm in-house counsel, I'm getting back into it.
Yeah, having to do a lot of
10 years later, more than 10 years later.
Yeah.
I'm realizing I should have paid more attention. There's a lot of value to be derived. They would lean heavily on corporate counsel now, but I didn't enjoy it at the time. I had that kind of ideological view.
Yeah.
That I really wanted to pursue kind of public good litigation, and said to me, corporate was in many ways the end. Not the antithesis, that's being really unfair, but it didn't feel like it's
aligned with. Yeah.
It's quite a white collar environment.
Mm-hmm.
Construction I enjoyed more than I thought I would. It was quite documentation heavy, but really started to improve my drafting, working on those kinds of documents. Commercial litigation was where I focused my attention. I was lucky I got to do a third seat, that kind of golden trick about where you want to qualify, you do third, to align with the qualification interviews. And I really enjoyed my seat there. We went to the Supreme Court, we did really high profile litigation. Yeah. And I liked the cut and thrust of the litigation. There's real energy once you start to get into the timetable of litigation, and I always saw myself going that direction. And then the secondment at Amazon was was really fun from another perspective, in that it was a very well-known company and there was lots going on there at the time.
In terms of Amazon, I mean, I'm personally very curious, but I'm sure people listening would be too, because I think that, a lot of us probably listening have order from Amazon on a weekly or maybe even a daily basis. From that legal perspective, I mean, what did a day in the life at Amazon HQ look like? What were you sort of getting up to?
You wake up in the morning and you put your Converse on. It's the unwritten rule that you have to wear Converse to enter the
Oh,
building.
interesting.
Once you get into the building, they always do something that I quite cringe, but I think it works really well. Is they do standing meetings. So if you're going to do a catch up,
Yeah,
you just form a circle, everybody stands, and
like a huddle.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, it is a huddle. And you literally get 30 seconds, 60 seconds to say your piece, go around the team, everybody does it, and then you're straight off to work. They really pride themselves on kind of efficiency and agility. Then conversely, they also have some quite weird meeting practices. I think most people are aware of these. They have 15 minutes silence at the beginning of meetings where everybody's expected to read the same briefing note. So if you want to have a meeting, you prepare the briefing note in advance. And Jeff, as everybody referred to, Jeff didn't believe that everyone was going to turn up at the same level of knowledge. So it's really important that everybody dedicate the time to sitting down, reading the briefing note, then you can start the meeting. So so it's quite kind of, there are rules to working at Amazon.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did a lot of interesting stuff during my time there. I think it was around the time we were launching Prime. They were launching Prime. One of the things that I did a lot of research on while I was there was they were investigating drone delivery. So I did a lot of research around aviation rules, basically, and the liability that would attach to one of these things fell out of the sky and landed on someone's head. How would that look? So I think they never really got through that. Drone delivery's sort of patchy, but it was a really kind of exciting, kind of emerging idea at the time I was there, which was back in 2015 or something like that. And then the other thing I remember doing quite a lot of work on was 0 hours contracts. So quite controversial. Amazon's general counsel was due to appear in front of the Parliamentary Select Committee. And so we were doing a lot of briefing with the GC around, just a reminder, here's what the law says. Just a reminder, here's how Amazon treats its employees. And obviously a lot of water's gone under the bridge since then with revision of those contracts and legislation in relation to them.
Wow, I mean that sounds super varied, and those rules that I think I'd heard about the 15-minute meeting, but the stuff about Converse and that's super interesting, for sure. And I guess, that was maybe your first time, I guess, sort of going in-house and seeing that side of it from private practice. And I think a lot of people listening will know with Oswang and the merger that happened. From the perspective of a lawyer, we always think about doing mergers for other companies and like doing a merger and acquisition, especially if you're in a corporate seat. That's kind of your bread and butter. Having been inside one, how did that look like for you in terms of your career trajectory? And did you have any prior notice that this was going to happen and you might have to look for options elsewhere?
Yeah, we had prior notice. There were lots of whispers, but I think I probably look back on that merger as probably the inflection point in my career. I was on quite a steady line there, and I developed really good relationships in the commercial litigation team at Allswang. By the time I came to qualify, the merger was just happening. And so what was a commercial litigation team of about maybe 10 to 15 partners at the time, and I felt I'd developed pretty good relationships across the team, and I stood a really good chance of qualifying into the department. Suddenly became, I think, a team of 55 partners or something, and all the associates that sit underneath it. But the difficulty was, I think, when it was just Allswang, they were looking to hire 2 associates. I thought, well, we've got a strong intake. I know maybe 3 or 4 of us going for that role. It'll be tight, but I fancied my chances. To all of the trainees from Navarro and all of the trainees for CMS were also going into the same application process. But they hadn't upped the number of hires they were making. It was still just 2.
Right.
So a lot of us were left disappointed. But in terms of the merger itself, there was predicted to be a great kind of Olswang exodus, because Olswang had a very, they would say it was unique, probably wasn't unique, but it certainly had an identity. Olswang was in, probably drank Kool-Aid a bit too much, but we always thought of ourselves as a cool law firm.
Yeah.
It was very tech focused. It was quite innovative. It was relatively small. I really liked that it was around kind of 400 people, which I know sounds large, but it's middle size London law firm. And so it was big enough that I kind of felt like I knew just about everybody's name.
Yeah.
But once it merged with CMS, and I think it became 4,000 or 5,000 people just in the London office, personally, that wasn't somewhere I wanted to work anymore.
Yeah.
I felt that was too big, too impersonal, too corporate. And so, yeah, I think you have to be careful when you're looking at mergers and acquisitions. You will lose good people, but there are macro forces that are much larger and much more compelling. And I'm in touch with a lot of my old Allswang colleagues still. And actually, a lot of the doom mongering that was happening at the time hasn't really come to fruition. Loads of them have stayed. They've been there for the past decade or whatever, and they say they love it, and they say there's still that kind of, still the Allswang gangs, and there's still the they've managed to keep enough of the culture. So perhaps I was a little out of step there.
That's super interesting, because I remember it being a really big thing at the time, and a lot of people talking about it. And I guess you see now the wave of mergers, and especially in the legal world, coming once again, with a lot of UK firms trying to merge with US firms and trying to increase their presence. So I think that is a reality, that a lot of people may be stepping into a firm, and by the time they qualify, that firm may be something different. And like you say, again, there's always fear mongering around it, but a lot of times you find that if a lot of the people have stayed, then a lot of that culture that you initially signed up to can remain. It's just a case of whether it's still the right place for you. And I guess for you, your journey moved on from there. And I really want to talk about then that transition to in-house, and sort of going back into sustainability and environmental law, which was where your passion was. So can you tell us a bit about that sort of move of when you decided you had done private practice and it was time to go in-house?
Yeah, so when I didn't get the role at CMS or Allswang, or whatever you want to call it at that point, I joined another smaller firm called Russell Cook, where I had interviewed on the premise that I was really interested in environmental litigation, and they were hugely supportive of that. They kind of said, "Oh yeah, we don't really have anybody who does that. Join the litigation team, and you can kind of carve out your own niche."
Right.
And I thought, this is brilliant. Okay, and they supported me to do my master's part-time while I was working. Amazing. So that was really great. I think I ultimately became a bit disillusioned with it, because it's quite a real small niche of firms that can attract that work. As an associate with no partner backing, I was doing what I could to try and attract clients. We kind of got into maybe some like crowdfunding work that could be done, but ultimately without a partner who could kind of guide me, it was, the blind leading the blind. So that environment, that kind of ambition of doing lots of environmental litigation was really difficult to get off the ground. And I ended up just doing more and more commercial, kind of straight commercial litigation.
Yeah.
Which, while I enjoyed, I didn't ultimately feel was what I got into the law to do. And so I suppose I was actively thinking about what I was going to do, and that was around the time of the pandemic. So there was a lot of time to think. Notwithstanding that the work didn't really go anywhere, but I felt like I had more time. And I actually received a call out of the blue from a recruiter saying, there's this company, Longevity. They're ESG consultancy to the real estate sector. They're a startup. They've got massive backing. They've expanded really rapidly. They're looking to make their first legal hire. Are you interested? And it was, not to be cliche about it, it wasn't like a light bulb moment, but it was like an aha, just because I'm not doing environmental litigation doesn't mean my career can't still in some way help address climate change. And so the past 5 years of my career now, I've really been focusing on green companies
Right.
that don't have a legal function. Coming in, being the first in-house counsel, build up the legal function and support, I suppose, climate change adaptation through being a business function,
For sure.
through improving the way that the company runs. So I like to think that, my environmental law background was one of the reasons I was contacted for that role.
Yeah.
Because it allowed me to speak a lot more of the same language that the consultants were speaking, and to take an interest in their projects, to understand them at a bit of a deeper level, and to align with them culturally and personally.
Yeah.
So that for me was a great transition in my career. I mean, a huge challenge once I landed, but something that really worked for me.
And I think that, that really shows there were lots of different steps along the way, and that commercial is not that the commercial practice you had went in waste. That was still handy, and it still helped you get to that ultimate goal. Because I think a lot of times, now it feels like there's so many options that you have to know right from the beginning exactly what you want to do, and you have to get into just that. But actually, every experience that you've had can be helpful in some way, and you can still get there, even if, that path doesn't look as straight as the beginning or as you thought. In terms of Longevity Partners, I guess, could you tell us a little bit about some of the projects that they were doing or things that you're getting up to, and how you were acting from a legal capacity?
When I joined Longevity, it was kind of 40 employees, and we had an office in England and then London and an office in France. And while I was there, it expanded rapidly. We opened in Netherlands, we opened in Japan, we opened in the US. And so that was a great eye-opener for me. I'd always thought most legal careers are quite jurisdictionally specific.
Yeah.
And once you get in-house, you can often be thrown into new and exciting but quite scary worlds. I mean, what I was doing day to day was fundamentally I was trying to secure the contracts.
Right.
So Longevity would sell consultancy services. So from a contracting perspective, it's actually quite simple. We were just selling our time, and we were just going to produce an output for you. That output was typically an ESG strategy for a company. You'd review the whole company and look at how you would perform against your ESR objectives. But I suppose the bread and butter of the company was green building certifications. There are probably 5 market-leading green building certifications, and real estate funds would look for consultants to give an independent opinion on the environmental sustainability credentials of the building stock that they were either owning, redeveloping, or looking to acquire. So we'd quite frequently be going all around the world to look at all these different buildings and write up reports on them. And I was, managing the entirety of the company's legal business. That was from hiring people to setting up new clients, securing the deals.
The employment practice coming in handy.
Incorporating subsidiaries in new jurisdictions, dealing with the company secretarial work, dealing with the board, dealing with the shareholders. I think when you're first lawyer in a new and growing business, there really is no limit to what you're asked to do, whether you understand it or not. As you saw from my background, I'm very comfortable with litigation. I don't think we did any litigation.
Right.
I'm quite comfortable with commercial contracting. I did a lot of that, but I was very quickly doing equity raises. I was very quickly doing debt raises. And I had to learn all that on the job. So it's quite a bit what I like about the in-house role is you're always learning. And going back to the beginning, I like to think that I try to stay quite calm in those situations where, okay, I'm not entirely familiar or comfortable with this. There are people I can lean on, resources I can read. I back myself to understand it, deliver a certain level of competency before, ultimately we need to instruct someone externally and rely on their professional ability.
Yeah. And from longevity to raw, which is the office we're sat in at the moment.
Yeah.
And I remember when I sort of first started this internship, having a basic understanding of EVs, but actually learning so much just
Yeah.
in the first couple of weeks. I guess for you coming in as head of legal into quite a specific business sense of you need to know a lot about the business when you're first sort of entering in terms of things that you don't necessarily learn in your law degree or even on an environmental law course for that matter. What attracted you to Raw, and how much of an understanding did you have about the business before you started?
What attracted me, again, it was that idea that it was a green business.
Yeah.
I do genuinely believe that electric vehicles are doing a large part towards climate change mitigation. So that was box one ticked. The other was meeting the executive team.
Yeah.
I thought they were really kind of expert and energetic team. And I could see that this was kind of a right place, right time. The consultancy services, yeah, they were kind of booming. You'll be the consultancy services will exist for a long time before and after.
Yeah.
EV to me looks like we've got this window, next 5 to 10 years for the infrastructure to be built. And it was quite exciting for me, the idea to come into a business and be relatively senior and be part of that growth journey.
Yeah.
Where hopefully, by 2030 or a little bit thereafter, we're looking back and saying, wow, the country went from almost no one driving EVs and everybody being scared about where they're going to charge to, there is a full suite of electric vehicle charging options throughout our country.
Yeah.
Raw is hopefully a good player in that mix. And I was able to come in when it was quite young and grow with it. So I just like those challenges where you've got the small p political alignment, you've got the idea of some quite exciting growth, and you know that you're going to be thrown in the deep end and asked to deal with lots of varied legal challenges.
Yeah, and I think, having been on site and now learning a bit more about the industry, it's so interesting to see that growth and actually notice it as well and see how much that EV industry has grown just in the last couple of years, and it's only going to grow further from here on out. In your journey, you've been part of established firms, you've done some comments at big firms like Amazon, and then consultancy, which was a relatively small firm, but the industry itself has been around for a long time. With a startup, there's a lot of challenges at the beginning. Things are not all structured and everyone is kind of just winging it and figuring out as they go along. When you first came in, were there any challenges that you faced that you sort of hadn't seen before, and how did you deal with them from a legal capacity?
Well, in one respect, it was doing the same job over again, because just like when I joined Longevity, joining Raw, I was the first lawyer in the building, and I came in and I said, how do you do your legal stuff? And they said, I don't know, look over there. And so, it was really building from the ground up.
Yeah.
So I enjoy kind of making order out of chaos.
Yeah.
That's part of what I like about the challenge.
Yeah.
But in another respect, it's very different because we require a lease for everything that we do.
Yeah.
You will have noticed that I did not do a property seat. I have not mentioned anything to do with property in my career.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I was being asked to negotiate leases, to complete leases, to get into substation leases, easements, way leaves. I mean, that may as well be Japanese to me.
Yeah.
So
back to landlord.
I vaguely remembered the Landlord and Tenant Act 1925 from my studies, but once I was done with that exam, that folder was thrown out. I didn't want to do that. But yeah, I like the challenge of educating myself more broadly. And I've been here nearly 2 years now, and I don't want to put on my CV that I'm a property expert, because I'm not. But I've definitely seen a lot of leases now, and I definitely can negotiate them. And I like that if you call yourself general counsel, I can put my hand on my heart and say, I do have quite a few strings to my bow now. So yeah, pretty uncomfortable at times trying to guide a young company through an area of law that you're not that familiar with, but it's a great challenge. And yeah, I like doing that.
It's amazing. I remember when we had the introduction to the legal team and understanding everything that you do, and today being understanding your journey as well. I think it's really interesting to see that those challenges can also be the most rewarding aspects when you can then see the results that enters, and especially working in house, you're then seeing your result actually result in growth for the company, and that can be both challenging when you're doing it, but rewarding when that result that you've always wanted comes in. And I think that that's a really nice aspect of being able to work in house and having all those different buckets that you're putting yourself into, and in all those different areas. And from here on out, Raw has a lot of goals and wants to really grow in the charts and become one of the top CPOs. And I can see, and hopefully the work that we're contributing to also helps with that in some way. What would you want your role to look like at Raw over the next couple of years, if you could choose?
I think I want to continue to build the team, really.
Yeah.
As I said, I came in and then since hired two paralegals and now hiring a property associate starting next month, which I'm thrilled about.
Yeah, hand over some of the property work.
Day one, I'll let her off, but
Yeah.
she's in trouble. No, I want to build, a team that's multi-skilled. I want to bring in more experts.
Yeah.
I want to find out how we can better get the business to achieve its objectives. At the moment, I'd say we are raw legal kind of 1.5. I came in, I kind of built 1.0, and we're incrementally improving how we share information with the rest of the business, how we feed into the strategy, how we manage risk. And I say manage because I never want to remove risk. I want to implement the amount of risk that the business is willing to take. And when you're in a startup, that risk level is quite high.
Yeah.
So anybody I hire, I always try to impart that message that we're not here to block, we're here to enable. But enabling comes with understanding risks, not by just saying that there's a risk and therefore you can't move.
Yeah.
So I want to continue to grow the expertise and the size of the team, and I want to continue to kind of fully integrate into the business. When you're starting out with a young company, you kind of get silos. I'm doing this, you're doing that, and we need to become kind of spread throughout the entire business with a watching and an advising brief and facilitating everything that we want to do.
I love that. And you spoke about mentorship and wanting to grow the team. For someone who is listening to this thinking, oh, this kind of job that Tom's doing sounds amazing. I want to be part of the green transition in some way from a legal perspective. What advice would you give to them if say they're at uni or they've just sort of started out in the job market about how they can get into this space in general?
Learn from my mistake. In hindsight, I shouldn't have gone the litigation route. I think I was probably quite naive about thinking that that's where I'd make my impact.
Yeah.
I think if you can become a commercial generalist in a way, then you can pick where you want to work, and that can be how you kind of feel the impact of your work. So for me, I've always been quite clear that the companies would need to be kind of green sector companies. And actually, if I could do my training over again, I'd have a lot more commercial, I'd have a lot more corporate, and I would understand the things that drive business value.
Yeah.
Whereas, if I look back and I say, well, do I do much commercial litigation anymore? No. Do I give a bit of employment advice now and then?
Yeah.
I'm really pleased when I don't have to. To those who would like to work in-house, try to keep those thoughts separate in your mind about if you do have an impact goal, then that doesn't need to form all of your training. You actually need a quite core set of commercial skills, and then you can apply that where you want to apply.
Amazing. We always finish off with a rapid fire, so just 3 quick questions to end off. So first one is, what does an ideal weekend in your life look like?
Like the weekend I just had, actually. I live down on the south coast, very close to the beach. I've got 2 young boys, so just spending the weekend on the beach with them, swimming, playing games.
Sounds amazing. Now, I know you mentioned that maybe you hadn't thought of this answer before, so hopefully maybe you have one. If not, we can skip this one. But if you could relive one day of your life, which one would you choose?
Yeah, I don't want to say something too cliche or corny.
We've had all the cliche ones. We can say it again.
I'm a big football fan, big West Ham fan, so I'm going to have to relive just about the only trophy I've ever seen us win, which was the 2023 Europa Conference League. People can stop themselves from laughing. That's full victory.
That's so interesting. When you say cliche, most people say, like the marriage or the birth of their children.
Yeah,
Or
well, I was
so
avoiding
this is
that.
actually more unique than that.
My
So
wife watches
yeah,
this. Apologies.
yeah. Then that was the wrong answer. And final question: what are the top three travel destinations currently on your bucket list?
Um, I would go to Madagascar. My sons have been watching Madagascar the film, so I promised
Nice.
them one day that we'd go. I'd love to see all the wildlife there.
Yeah.
Um, Costa Rica. My sister and my wife have both been to Costa Rica several times and never let me live it down that I haven't been. Um, they rave about it. Incredible beaches, so I got to get there.
Yeah.
And the last one I think would be India. I had I had a chance actually between my paralegal role and starting my training contract. So I had a year out, which I didn't have a gap year after university. I thought, oh, brilliant! I'll go to India. I think I'd really love to go to India and visit, both the rural and the city areas. And there's just so much culturally. There's so much to do. And then Volkswagen actually called me up and said, "Do you want to start your training contract early?" And like the good boy I was,
Yeah.
I said of course, and I missed out on that. So I think in hindsight, I should have taken that time and gone to India.
Well, I'd recommend. Well, all my family are from India, so yeah, you should definitely give it a visit. But on that note, Tom, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was so nice to be able to speak to you and do it whilst on this amazing internship as well. So yeah, thank you so much for taking out the time.
Well, best of luck with the rest of the internship.
And on that note, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and a massive shout out to Tom for coming on Commerce Meets Law. As I said during the intro, really enjoyed recording this episode, and it was something different. I think the last time we recorded in an office was at the Scadden offices, so this was really, really fun for me to do, and I hope that you learned a lot from this episode as well. If you did enjoy this episode, please do let me know by emailing commercemeetslaw@gmail.com or with a DM on Instagram at Commerce Meets Law, and you can also reach out to us on our website, which will be linked down in the description. Finally, for access to my content, do check out the Commerce Meets Law YouTube channel and our TikTok. For now, take care, goodbye, and I'll see you very soon on the next episode.